Fresh off his trip to Washington, Conservative MP Jamil Jivani has some choice words for how the government is handling trade talks with the United States. Jivani told Breitbart News that Canada is shooting itself in the foot by throwing an anti-American hissy fit over trade. Take a listen to some of what he told SiriusXM's Breitbart News Saturday.
We are shooting ourselves in the foot if we continue this anti-America, hissy fit. And this is the kind of reason I'm trying to talk into our government and some of the Liberals who have just gone way off the reservation on this. And, the ball is in Prime Minister Mark Carney's court. Like, I've offered to help him. I think it'd be awesome if we went down there together. I think we could get a lot done working together. But he's got to decide whether that's something he wants to do or not.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mark Carney has chosen the person tasked with spearheading the upcoming CUSMA negotiations. Former Privy Council Clerk Janice Charette has been named Chief Trade Negotiator to the United States. Charette will serve as a senior advisor to Carney and Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc. The power panel is here with us now. Vandana Cutter was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Brad Levine is a former national campaign director for the NDP. Amanda Galbraith was an advisor to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And here with me in studio is my old boss, Rob Russo, the Canada correspondent for The Economist. Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. Thanks for coming in on Family Day and joining your PNP family today. Amanda, I'll start with you on this Jamil Jivani stuff. He's saying that Canadians are throwing an anti-American hissy fit. What do you make of that description? It's provoked a lot of anger online, as you've probably seen. Do you think Mr. Jivani has it right there?
No, I don't think Mr. Jivani has it right there. I'm super pumped to be the first one to talk about this issue from the conservative side. I was like, no good deed goes unpunished going on TV on Family Day Monday. Listen, I think this is a bit of an exercise in vanity on Mr. Jivani's part. Do I think there is frustration, rightly so, among Canadians, among the opposition, among premiers about the lack of transparency, and among the media, by the way, around the lack of transparency from the Carney government on the status of negotiations with the U.S., on readouts from the Prime Minister's office? Why are we learning major announcements from U.S. outlets and not here? I do think there actually is some real concerns, right concerns about that. Would I equate that to an anti-American hissy fit? Absolutely not. I think if these efforts were, I do believe Mr. Jivani has connections there. It's very apparent. If he wanted to be a useful part of a negotiating strategy, then he could provide that information privately, not through Breitbart media. Also, to say that Canadians are undertaking an anti-American hissy fit when, I'm from Windsor, Ontario. Like, I'm seeing the absolute desecration of the auto sector, the threats around the bridge there. I mean, it's having real measurable impacts for people's jobs. It's not an anti-American hissy fit. And they're also happening in his riding, rather. So I think Mr. Jivani needs to kind of take a beat here and really think through whether his political future in Canada wants to be reassured by being siding with the Trump White House versus Canadians.
Yeah, Amanda, to Amanda's point, Vandana, I mean, there's a reason why some folks are having a, quote, hissy fit, right? You talking about the auto sector. Look at what happened in Ingersoll. Look what happened in Brampton. We've had two major plants close and literally thousands of people are out of work. The forestry sector has been obviously hard hit. The list goes on. There's a lot of reasons why Canadians are upset with Trump and his administration. What do you make of the tack that Jivani is taking here? I mean, he seems to be kind of leaning into this idea that maybe that there's a reason why America could blame Canada for some things, and that maybe we've gone overboard in terms of our criticism, our boycotts, our animosity towards the U.S. right now.
I think Amanda sent that really well, but just to add, I think this commentary isn't going to age well, especially across Canadians. I think it doesn't really hit the fact that a lot of Canadians are struggling right now as a direct result of this administration's actions, whether it's auto workers who are unsure about their future, whether it's tariffs and the cost of living, small businesses are hurting, and people are just concerned. And I think those are real concerns. There's not a hissy fit. It's a real reason. But those comments are also reminiscent of when Trump started talking about the 51st state and Ambassador Hoekstra was like, well, don't make a big deal about it. So I don't think Canadians would appreciate that. I don't think he's meeting the moment. And I think, it's not just what the Prime Minister is doing, but premiers across the country, across the political spectrum, Premier Eby, Doug Ford, et cetera, they're all talking about how Canada has to sit up for themselves in their own way. So I don't think Mr. Jivani is going to meet the moment. And I think, I don't think this is going to go well for him in the end.
Brad, what about Jivani's fundamental point? And that is that 3/4 of our exports go to the United States. We are very much dependent on what Trump does. We should try and patch things up, that we shouldn't just prolong a fight, that we should, try and get to a better, state of affairs with Trump and his administration, and that might involve humbling ourselves a bit, maybe swallowing some of the things that come our way. Do you think that Jivani might have the ticket to how we solve this issue? I mean, look past the hissy fit remark. Is he on to something when he says, hey, let's try and bring this together and have some sort of peaceful resolution?
Well, my understanding, and when we listen to the remarks of the Prime Minister, it's that the door has always been open. I don't know at what point the federal government of Canada closed the door and said we're not going to talk anymore. I think that there was a lot of learning about how Trump operates, and I think at the beginning people were flying down there every day and worried about fentanyl and all these things, and basically I think taking the bait. And I think the government of Canada said, well, we're not going to race down there every time this guy tweets something out. So I think it's a little too easy for a conservative backbench critic to be able to say what you're doing is not working. Now we can complain about the lack of results, but I don't think the average Canadian is going to be blaming Carney and the federal government. I think they're going to be blaming the Americans. Let me get to the politics. The politics of his comment that this is an anti-American hissy fit is not just going to make news today, and maybe for a couple more days. I can see the attack ad already. That is, so many Canadians are hurting because of the uncertainty. Tens of thousands of Canadians are losing their job. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety. And then to equate that to a hissy fit won't just come back for the Conservatives over the next 24, 48 hours. It's going to come back the next time we go to the polls, because that election attack ad is ready for an anti-Conservative message, whether it comes from the NDP or the Liberals.
Rob?
Well, JP, let the record show that I was one of the few people who thought that Mr. Jivani could be useful. And he has been useful, except not to the right side. He's been useful to the advancing the American interests. If he's talking about us pitching a hissy fit, he's not advancing Canada's interests. Now, who's responsible for where we are? It was the United States under Donald Trump that turned its back on its best friend. It was the United States under Donald Trump that scorned what it is we have to provide. He says we don't have anything that the United States needs. It was the United States that dismissed a trade pact that he himself signed. So I had hoped that Mr. Jivani could be useful, because nobody sees the President of the United States. Nobody, unless a lot of machinery gets in gear, even if it's a kind of a walk-by, drive-by deal. Like, that is a big deal. And I would have hoped that he would have used the opportunity to advance our interests. So where does that leave the Conservatives? I think the thing to watch for is 10 days from now, Mr. Poilievre is going to be holding a discussion in Toronto. I think it's at the Economic Club, where he will be discussing the Canada-U.S. relationship, and where I'm told that he is going to advance or evolve or shed light on his position. And it's part of, I think, a series of policy speeches Mr. Poilievre intends to make over the next few months. I think that's where we're going to have to watch to see whether or not there is a common front. And there doesn't necessarily have to be a common front. I think there is room for Mr. Poilievre to oppose the government, to propose another approach. But I think that Mr. Jivani has an opportunity, and I think that he squandered it.
Yeah, Amanda, as Rob points out, I mean, it's pretty incredible that this MP has a 15-year friendship with J.D. Vance, that he was at his wedding. You know, they really do have a lot of history between these two, right? And it's certainly something that could be tapped into. I mean, as Rob points out, he can easily get an audience with Donald Trump. I mean, that's pretty impressive no matter what he accomplished. I mean, he obviously has an in there. Do you think that Poilievre should use Mr. Jivani more, maybe put him up as a point person on Canada-U.S. relations, or should they kind of stuff him in the back bench and forget that he even has that sort of connection?
I would hope his northern tour takes him into the Arctic if I were Pierre Poilievre over the next little bit. Like, I do not see any benefit. Jamil Jivani is not being a team player right now, right? The first time he announced his U.S. tour was the same day that Pierre Poilievre was in meeting with Prime Minister Carney, which is a significant thing for the opposition leader to do, and it's supposed to be a reset. Instead, he was stepping on that message. Once again, this week, is now even apologist for the Americans in some way, which to me is just not helpful. Yes, Mr. Jivani is very, very intelligent. He's got many connections to the U.S. administration. I think he could be tremendously useful if he could be trusted. But it's the Jamil Jivani show, which is very apparent to me based on, I think, and all the people in this room. So how far can he be trusted to work with the prime minister to advance anyone's interests? So I think it's unfortunate. I think Rob put it well, right? He squandered, I think, an opportunity to really help his country. And instead it is about self-promoting. And I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, Vandana, the other thing that Jivani said in that Breitbart interview is that he'd like to go to Washington with Mr. Carney. He'd like the two of them to go and be negotiators with Trump and others in the Capitol. And he said that maybe they can get something done for the country that's good. What's the Prime Minister's play here? Should he lean on Jivani or should he run away? Is there any use to Jivani in the government strategy?
I think given what he has said and that he's already shot himself in the foot, I don't think the prime minister, it makes any sense for him to use him. I think he's proven that he cannot be trusted, and this is really a vanity tour. And you've seen it before, like he was appointed by Doug Ford and was criticizing his education minister. He had a job in media for a bit and then that didn't work out for him. So I think he likes to just walk to his own beats. And I think should this not have happened, I do appreciate, the concept of put me in coach, but then you have to wait for the play. And you have to work for what the strategy is the government's working in. I think he's already shown that he's unable to work within that. So while it could have been a very useful tool for us, and I think Mr. Carney would have absolutely used any help he had, even beyond partisan lines, I think at this moment, given what has come out of this tour and the comments he made, I don't see how Mr. Carney takes him on.
Brad, what about Poilievre in all this? I mean, as Rob points out, there will be a speech in the coming days where he will lay out what he thinks the strategy should be for the Canada-U.S. file. That's a difference between now and what he did in January when he addressed party delegates at his convention in Calgary. He didn't even mention Trump by name, right, in that primetime speech. He sort of dodged the issue entirely. Where does the Conservative Party go on this issue? We know it's not going away. Trump still has 3 more years. When you look at the polling today from Abacus, Trump and the U.S. is still a top 3 issue. It is a major concern for voters, just below affordability and the cost of living. How do they craft a message on this that can, get them through the next 3 years of what could be a very rocky road?
Yeah, I think that in hindsight, Poilievre's inability to even mention Trump's name at his convention was a problem because it was noticeable. What I found interesting, though, is when I looked at former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and he's been doing quite a bit of media with his unveiling of the portrait, he held nothing back, mentioned the name quite often. So it'll be interesting to see the evolution of Poilievre's ability to speak to it, because you can try to push cost of living, and that is a top issue in the data set, and we'll talk about it. But Trump has this ability to get into our news, and he has this great ability to dominate the conversation in this country. And when you refuse to talk about the man or even have a position, you're leaving yourself wide open. The question is the coalition such like what we see at the United Conservative Party in Alberta with the separatists there? 16% of all of Daniel Smith's people are leaning towards separating. When you got to keep the pro-Trump conservatives together in the coalition, the inability to speak to it, I think he's going to have to just say, you know what? If you like Donald Trump, you're not really going to go too many places. I know he had attack against the People's Party in previous elections, but to keep the coalition together, there's more to be gained by talking about Trump than there is by keeping the coalition together by trying to ignore him.
Rob?
I'm not sure I would have advised them to talk about Trump at that party convention. His job was to hang on to his leadership. He is doing the right thing now. You cannot ignore it. The problem with not talking about it when the convention was on was that the father of the modern Conservative Party, Stephen Harper, was talking about it and talking about it quite eloquently. Yep. So it was going to be hard for Mr. Poilievre not to shiver in the shadow of Stephen Harper. And it was that event that I think made Mr. Poilievre's silence on the matter more jarring. But tactically, I don't think he could have said that then. He would have alienated people that he was trying to win over. Now is the time to do it. Let's see what he does. Let's see where he goes. Let's see which path he takes in order to try and come to a resolution. I think the longer we go without a deal with the United States, the more the question arises. I know we're going to talk about polling, and we're going to talk about the possibility of an election as a result of polling, but we ran an election last time on Mr. Carney being best positioned to deal with Donald Trump. We don't have a deal with Donald Trump. So what is the next election going to be on? What is the pretext for the next election if you're the Liberals? Again, there is an opening for a Conservative leader in this scenario. But let's see how adroit Poilievre is going to be 10 days from now.